This Talking Flutes podcast is kindly sponsored by Trevor James Flutes, making life sound beautiful. You can show them some flute love by following them on Instagram at TJ Flutes, Trevor James Flutes on Facebook, and at trevorjamesflutes.com.
Hello, this is Talking Flutes, and I'm Clare Southworth, and today I'm chatting to the fabulous flutist and educator, Abigail Burrows. Hello, Abbie.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Now, I've read about your flute journey, and it really reminds me of my own, because we've both got links with the Purcell School and the Royal Academy, and our playing careers have both had a sort of really eclectic mix. Plus, we both live by the seaside.
We do. Yeah.
I think we're both so lucky to have such diverse jobs. So I'd love you to talk to us about, I mean, you've done so much in your career to date, but could we start from the beginning about how your flute playing first began? Because I think you were at the Purcell School really early, weren't you?
Sure, yes. I was young when I started there. I first heard a flute when I was 4 years old. I was at a concert that my brother was playing in at school. He plays the double bass, and I was very bored. And then someone came on with a flute, and one of those sort of moments, you know, I just didn't know something could sound like that. And it also looked so sparkly and like a sword, you know, and it was just amazing. And I desperately wanted to play it, but I was a bit too young, you know, being 4 years old, I think. My parents couldn't find anyone to teach me. And I begged for one. I drove my parents up the wall, because I get quite obsessive over things, and I was absolutely adamant that I needed to play it. I sort of studied it, listened to it, made one, I think, you know, out of various things around the house, toilet rolls and stuff. And then when I was 7, I went for a consultation lesson, and they still said I'd be too young because I just turned 7, I think, by a month or so. The local music service said I might be too young, but he'd give me a go. And I managed to get a note out the flute, and I was so passionate about it that he agreed to teach me. And that's how...
a standard flute, Abbie, or was that a curved head flute?
No, it was a standard flute, which, you know, not ideal, but it was my beloved Yamaha 211, 2T, my flute. I treated it a bit like a pet. It went everywhere with me. It had a little place in bed, you know. I used to put it to bed, poor thing. But I managed to get a sound out of it, and I must admit that was my first lesson. I think there was some kind of divine intervention, because actually by the second one it got a bit harder, but there was a sort of moment of like a big sound, and and I loved it. I was obsessed with it like nothing else.
So that becomes a passion, doesn't it? So how did you arrive at the Purcell School? What age did you go there?
I auditioned when I was 8.
Early.
Very soon after. I was very obsessed. So I worked very hard very early on. I sort of skipped grades quick, and then I auditioned for Purcell when I was 8 and went there when I was 9, and I went for 9 years.
Well, and were you boarding from the age of 8?
No, I had quite an unusual situation. I had a very happy home life, and my parents, you know, were reluctant to send me to boarding school, but also they saw it as a great opportunity, you know, for me to pursue music, which I was so obsessed with. Well, actually, no, more just the flute. Actually, it was all flute. But I wasn't so into music, funny enough. It was just the flute. But my mum would take me on the train. We lived in Bletchley. In Milton Keynes, and she took me on the train all the way. It was in Harrow back then, the school, and she'd take me to Harrow on the train, and then I'd get the school minibus, and it was sort of a 2-hour journey to and from school, which was quite long at that age.
That's incredible. That is a long time.
And my mum, bless her, she was a dinner lady as well, so she'd take me to school, go back and do her afternoon job for lunch, come back and get me, take me home again, and that was every day. It was quite a commitment.
Dedication. It's incredible how many of us have parents who really put themselves out in order for us to sort of continue our passion, follow our passion, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, my parents are both really musical. They're not actually musicians themselves, but they're music lovers and definitely musicians. They've got a fine ear and support the arts and go to lots of concerts and love it.
So very lucky to have, and I was also very similar. Now, so you were at the Purcell for a long time, and then where did you go?
Oh, well, it gets a bit quirky now. I went to the Royal College of Music after Purcell School, but I'm a bit of a rogue because I didn't complete my degree. To be honest, I failed my first year. They let me stay, and then I failed my second year as well. So I had a spectacular fall from grace, and they were going to let me continue, but I think it was sort of obvious all round that I needed a bit of a break, and I took a gap year, which has been a very long time now.
Do you think the problems at the Royal College were because of the intensity of the specialist school?
It's a really good question. I wouldn't have had my musical journey be any other way. And the training that I had, at Purcell was wonderful, but it was more it was more personal. It was, I had burnout. Because I had I got quite far quite early, and I was a sort of child performer, and I was doing some sort of really prestigious things and lots of traveling, and I had quite a busy concert diary, from a really young age.
Yeah.
And I didn't manage the transition into adulthood as a musician. And I just absolutely had burnout. I couldn't play anymore. I couldn't find any expression or any, and I actually started to dislike it.
That's so sad. But, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I also I taught for many years at Cheetham School of Music too. And I've come across so many players who've come through the specialist schools and have had fantastic education, but have also had a bit of burnout. And I know quite a few have taken time out to sort of regroup and, just have some time off before they come back. So it's a very brave thing to do, and very refreshing to hear, actually. So well done, you.
Oh, thank you. Well, it was, it's unconventional. And to be honest, I don't know if I'd ever recommend it, because I had quite a tough time, but I also wouldn't change it for the world. It sort of shaped me into the sort of who I am now, as a player. And
yes, and you couldn't be more successful, Abbie, with the things you've done. We'll go through them, and you've just had such an incredible career to date. So did you go back to a college to study, or was that it then?
No, I quit for 5 years. I didn't touch the instrument, and I couldn't
years.
a long time. And early on in that, I couldn't bear to go to a concert, or even, I remember getting upset walking past a busker, I couldn't be anywhere near it. It was because it was quite painful as well, because like you say, like we said earlier as well, about all the support that you have. You get support and everything from your parents, your teachers, everyone that invested in you and nurtured you. And it almost felt like I was ungrateful, by leaving it all behind. So it was very sort of tough psychologically, and also just very sad. I just couldn't do it anymore. But I did 5 years of, I hate the sort of term, but normal jobs. And then I really missed it, and I did go back to training, but I didn't go back to an institution. I considered it, and the Royal College actually were very kind to me, and I had even a meeting with them. But no, I just had private lessons. I had private lessons with I'd studied with Anna Pope at the Purcell School. She was fabulous, and I've been very lucky with my teachers. And then when I restarted after my hiatus, it was Michael Cox, and Robert Wynne, and I studied with them privately, and I took my lessons ever so seriously because I had a lot of catching up to do. So it was a tough time because I had to work, survive in London, but also pay for all my flute lessons and also find time to practice. And when you're handing over your sort of, handing over your cash, that you've earned.
Yes.
And, it's, I would have my lessons. I would go and write notes afterwards. I would practice intensively, and is that a word? But I fought pretty hard to kind of get back in my foot back into the industry and to.
But you certainly did get back into the industry, Abbie. I mean, the things you do are amazing. Now, let's go through a few of the things that you do. So you play in orchestras and chamber groups, and you do musicals. You play in the West End. Are you doing the West End at the moment?
I am. Yeah, I'm a deputy, and I dep on it's Lion King, which is a lot of fun. Mary Poppins, Phantom, and Les Mis.
Wow, how exciting. So you've got to play a huge amount of ethnic flutes, don't you?
Oh, for Lion King, yeah, it's terrifying, but really nice, really nice. It's a good one. I've even got to do some panpipes, which is really out of the comfort zone. But
that is so clever. Did you have to sort of learn the instruments, or had you already been dabbling?
Yes, there's a lot to learn, and I must admit, I learned the show rather than the instruments themselves. But if I have more time, it's my aim to learn these flutes properly, because it's a whole different way of playing, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think it's so clever of you to do these shows, because I know how difficult it is when I've spoken to other people who've done them. Do you have a favourite show?
Oh, my favourite show of all time is Les Mis. I've been a fan since I was about 8 years old. I mean, like a super fan. I think I've seen it over 34, 35 times or something, which is ridiculous. It was actually my dream to play in the pit when I was a kid. So to have now the chance to do it, I was on tour for a year before lockdown.
Yeah.
Doing it on tour as my chair, but I do love it. But it sounds awful. I think I might prefer being in the audience. The flute part's it's okay, it's good, but it's my absolute favorite ever was a show called Flowers for Mrs. Harris, which was a very intimate, beautiful show it was all very acoustic, and it was Richard Taylor was the composer, and they did it at Chichester Festival, and it was just gorgeous, chamber music and lovely story. It's the Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, that lovely story.
Now, I'm just thinking, for the people who are listening, that's thinking, oh, I'd love to play in a show. How did you do that? How did you get to play in a show? Did you audition? Were you asked?
Oh, it's a brutal industry, isn't it? It's not actually, I don't think it's very fair. It can be very difficult to break into because there isn't a clear path. Yeah, and it's I think that's quite cruel, really. But I think to anyone for any advice that they do want to get into it, I'd say immerse yourself in the industry. Go to shows and ask to sit in on shows as well, because a lot of players are allow that as well, so you can sit in the pit and listen to the show. And I think also doing things like the fringe theatres, amateur productions, they're a huge amount of fun doing those. And I think that get yourself good enough so that when you get your lucky break, you do a good job, because lightning might not strike twice, and I do believe that for everybody in any show that in the West End, they've had a lucky break. It was maybe a teacher that gave them the chance to play, or maybe a moment where somebody was ill and they needed someone last minute and they were desperate, or a friend. I think unfortunately it is vague like that, isn't it? But I think if you get yourself ready.
Yeah, that's good advice. And I think it's really good what you said about immersing yourself, because you've got to show that you're keen and that you're willing, and to make contacts. Networking is so important.
I agree, but and I think sometimes networking is misunderstood, isn't it? It's misread. There's often a thing that's often said in the West End as well, that it's always about who you know and all this kind of thing, but it makes it sound a bit seedy in a way. You don't have to be friends or down the pub, and I think that it's actually deeper than that. I think that there's genuine connections, because there's genuine connections made by a genuine love of the theatre, and the networking part of it is important, but it has to be genuine as well. And I think sometimes it can be, this networking thing it can be misunderstood, can't it, by young people? I think it's so hard to navigate, isn't it?
It's hard to navigate, and it's hard to know how to sort of make contacts and how to sort of, if we're going to use the word network, how to network without sort of annoying people, upsetting people. It's sort of, I suppose it's to be yourself and have a profile and show that you're sort of a hard worker and you're willing to learn and fit in. Fitting in is obviously key to all these things.
And also be nice, because no one, everyone's doing those shows, aren't they? Sort of night after night. They want to sit. It's not sort of about being popular, but they don't want to. They want to sit next to someone nice, So there's like you said, be yourself, and but it's. I think it's just important to be authentic as well, because I think some people, especially in the show world, it's better paid than some other work, and that can be intriguing, but actually you've got to love the shows if you're going to play them well, I think, because they're
well, you've been hugely successful in doing those. Now, what about other playing? Let's look at the classical field. Tell us a bit about your classical side.
Well, to be honest, I mean, the classical side has been going well, but it flourished later in my career, for sure. I think because of my wobbly beginnings in my early professional career, I was nervous, to set foot in the classical world. So I sort of hid behind being in a pit, in a show, where I felt a bit safer, and also sort of doing more sort of popular. I played with a band for a while, and that was a lot of fun, and it was really important to me to do things that I was enjoying. And also I didn't quite feel ready, because my standard of playing, I've flourished, I'd say, in my early 30s, I think. So I don't think I was good enough to do particularly well. Not good enough's a horrible term, isn't it? But ready.
Feeling comfortable in your ability. Yeah.
So I was late. So I didn't do a lot of orchestral playing, a lot of classical playing. I did, splatterings of things, but to be honest, I always felt extremely uncomfortable and didn't enjoy them at all. But I love it now, and that's something I want to do more of. And I am going in as a freelancer in sort of in the orchestral setting, and I love every minute of it. And I'm nervous in a good way, good nerves, not those sort of harrowing ones, that sort of crippling anxiety, that I have suffered from in the past in that setting, and I absolutely love it now. So I dip into a few orchestras on a freelance basis. I really enjoy it.
That's wonderful. So who would you say, in terms of flute players, who would you say has been your greatest influence? A hard one.
That is a hard one. That's a really hard one. Jean-Pierre Rampal was always my go-to, my favorite. My teachers, obviously, have had a huge impact, and I've got a huge respect for them, and I love hearing them, play as well. The flute itself was the superstar for me. I didn't sort of go for an icon, as it were. I mean, I have, I loved, James Galway, and I love, so many flute players, but it was actually more about the flute itself rather than an idol. But I've been doing a flute festival, and there's been lots of flute players involved, lots of huge amount of players, and I've actually had so much inspiration from all of them in the last few years. There's been another surge, if you like, of me learning and being led by them. So just I suppose just the whole flute community, because also you get a lot, don't you, without meaning to get all sort of deep and stuff, but you as a teacher, you get so much from your students and from teaching them, and also just from your colleagues and your friends and the people that you're playing with. But in particular, the flute community, it's a lovely group, isn't it? We all tend to be particularly obsessed, I think, with our instrument. I don't know if that's true across the board of all instruments. We seem to be particularly loyal, don't we, with all our activities and our societies and our groups and things. And I just a huge amount of inspiration from the whole community.
Yeah, I agree.
Sorry, I didn't really answer that question very well, but yeah, that's the general.
Perfectly. If you could pick one highlight from your career to date, what would it be?
This is slightly generalized rather than highlighting a concert, because I know the ones that I'd put at the top of my CV, but they're not the ones I'd pick. Actually, the first thing I did after coming back to music was I went into outreach work. So I did a lot with Live Music Now. So I just pick Live Music Now as being the highlight of what I do in music, which is the places that we went into, the schools and all the assemblies with the kids, like, wow, flute, and going into nursing homes and hospitals and hospices and prisons. I did a huge amount of that kind of work, and it was the most rewarding, fantastic work that I've ever done.
Yeah, I did the same. Zillions of concerts in a short space of time, hospitals and prisons and nursing homes.
It was brutal, wasn't it? Yeah, sometimes you do 2, maybe 3 a day, and on a little tour. But it's like, it was fantastic. I was devastated when I still do outreach work now, but not quite on the same scale. It was almost felt like it was full time, with Live Music Now, and it was just wonderful. Yeah, it's an amazing scheme.
Yeah, it is amazing. Now, Abbie, you're also the founder of the eFlute Festival, which sounds fascinating. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Oh, it's I've just finished the second one, actually. The first eFlute Festival was 2 years ago, and it was at the very beginning of the first lockdown in the UK. I have an adult flute group that I work with. We had monthly meetings at All Flutes Plus in London, and I thought I wanted to do something nice with them as a group online, because I'm very much that live is better, but online is better than nothing. And we were all it was the height of lockdown, and obviously people have a lot of time to play their flutes as well, so it's sort of perfect fluting time. So I was going to put together just a small thing, and it just accidentally snowballed.
In a good way.
In a really great way, but it snowballed bigger than I could have ever imagined. I didn't think it would go to the scale it did. And we had people from 16 different countries signing up. I was asking artists to take part, and then that snowballed as well, because everyone was free, which was very nice, and people wanted to do things. So I couldn't get it organised sort of quick enough, but it was hard work. I was sort of up until about 4 a.m, organising everything, and I just got really carried away. I think I mentioned earlier that I can get a little obsessive, and I really sort of went into an admin hole of trying to make it as good as possible. But it's basically a big online flute festival. And it was a huge success, actually, and I had great help from Jana Hunniker, who I work with. She runs Flute School London. We do courses together, and she helped me, and I couldn't have done it without her. It was it became a lot of work. Yeah, a huge amount of people, huge amount of artists. We did competition. We were doing events. We were doing concerts. It was insane. I don't know what I was thinking, to be honest, but it's
fantastic for people who could watch it, because there have been some positives from COVID, and that's one of them, that people were around, you could do things online. I've talked to so many people on Zoom for this podcast that I wouldn't normally have been able to meet because they'd be too far away. We've all sort of changed direction a little bit, so there have been some positives, but I think an e-festival is a fantastic idea. So well done.
Thank you. Yeah, we did another one, and it was throughout the whole of April. Sorry. It was throughout the whole of April. And it had 30 artists over 30 days, like a sort of flute advent calendar, some kind of class going on. And to be honest, I thought that this time I didn't think that I'd have the same response, because, people are out and about now and not locked in, but I think they want it as well. And we have an eFlute Academy that runs once a week for people that want to keep doing it. We've been doing that since the very first one, so it's a little online flute community.
Wonderful. You've tapped into a need.
It was accidental, and I'm absolutely the worst person for it as well. I'm not going to lie. I live on a boat, and the Wi-Fi is, as you can probably hear, I don't know if I'm cutting in and out, but it's dreadful.
Oh, goodness me,
So
I got into that. You live on a boat. How exciting! So it's a canal.
yes, it's a wide beam, so I sort of cheat a bit. It's sort of like a floating flat a bit, but it's no, it's lovely. Just at times it drives me crazy, and it's not really the venue to be running an online festival, but especially with my dog barking as well. And
yeah, well, one of the last podcasts I did with John Paul Wright, and I've got 3 retrievers, and they all came home from a dog walk, and all barking and drinking water, and it was mayhem. And he left it in. He said, "Oh no, we'll leave this in. It's fun." So, so does your boat move? Do you actually go up and down the canals, or do you stay in one place?
I'm lazy. I've got a mooring, so I live on a boatyard. It's lovely. It's an old Victorian boatyard in Tunbridge, next to the park.
So how do you get to the Purcell School each week?
Well, that's a drive. It's not too bad. It's sort of an hour and a half, I suppose. I actually love driving, and it's the only time where I'm sort of guilt-free of just putting the radio on, and having a bit of me time without getting a bit anxious that I need to do something, because the boat, never mind busy life, the boat is sort of a bit of a job by itself. It needs maintaining, so I can't just sit on it and. Well, I can, but sitting in a car, you've got to just relax. So I quite enjoy it. Well, I must admit, I recently, like we said, living by the seaside, I've recently bought a little flat in Margate, and I needed a bit of land. I was going mad. So it's a bit of a mix now between sort of living there and floating here.
Also very exciting. Tell us about your plans for the future. Have you got any? Are you going to do another e-festival?
I think I will, because as long as people want it, I'll keep doing it. It's got a lovely atmosphere, and I think because of the sort of situation, it's very informal, and I think that's nice. So it's low pressure, and it's got a great atmosphere with a lovely sort of following now. So as long as they still want it, I'll keep doing it. But I do definitely need a break, because it's a lot of work. So I think I will do one, maybe in a year, maybe in 2. Other plans for the future. I want to do more playing of the low flutes, because I've really been enjoying doing a bit more work on the alto and bass flute. So I'm wanting to do a bit more practice and get better at those. And as I say, doing a little bit more of the sort of classical work as well. Getting back into doing some more solo concerts as well, which used to terrify me. But you're saying about the pandemic, it's been terrible, but there has been some silver linings. There's been some opportunities. There's been some good. And one of the things for me is that I managed to shed a lot of my performance anxiety. I just feel like I had a reset.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to sort of trying different things. And I did some improvising the other day, and that is so And to be honest, this as well. I am a bit nervous doing this podcast, but I might have, I'm pushing my personal boundaries a bit and trying to do new things, and really enjoying it. That's my plans for the future, branching out into different things.
Yeah, you've got such a diverse career, and it all sounds very exciting with your teaching and your playing and your outreach programs. You've made a fantastic job of it so far, and I wish you every success for the future, Abbie. People are listening. If you're going to the shows, if you're going to the West End, have a look down that pit and see if you can see Abbie sitting there, and go and say hello. And Abbie, thanks so much for joining us and your finding time in your busy life. It's been lovely to talk to you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thanks ever so much.
You're very, very welcome. And as always, if anyone listening has got any questions, then you can email us on flutepodcast@gmail.com, or you can drop us a message on Twitter, Facebook. Facebook, we've got a designated page called Talking Flutes. So when you hear Abbie and I chat, if you want to ask her any other questions, drop us a line there, or on Twitter and Instagram, it's @Flute or @Clare Flute. But until then, many thanks, Abbie, and hope we talk again soon.
Definitely. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Talking Flutes and Talking Flutes Extra are podcast productions by the Trevor James Flute Company. For more information, visit trevorjamesflutes.com.